The air in the vault was thick with pulverized steel and the burning scent of a set. It was 4:50 a.m. in the Shurabad district, South Tehran. Inside the archive, a concrete cube, masquerading as a detergent storage facility's X-Men were moving with violent, desperate speed. One agent, identified only by his calcined gill, watched the heat haze ripple off the 3-foot-thick steel door they had just carved open. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline overload of a sustained breach. The alarm wasn't local. It was the central monitoring system they had gambled everything to avoid. They had, at best, 7 minutes before the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence MOI dispatched the first response unit. 7 minutes to secure 50,000 pages of nuclear history. 163 compact discs detailing the entire structure of the Ahmed Planiran's secret roadmap to the bomb. Gil looked at the stacks of labeled black boxers, each weighing nearly 100 pounds. They had planned for 4 hours. They had 3 minutes remaining. The silence of the desert night was about to be replaced by sirens. The fate of a geopolitical balance, the safety of an entire nation, and the careers of every intelligence officer in Tel Aviv hung on the synchronization of 6 watches ticking down to 0 in a foreign industrial park. This was the moment the Mossad had designed, executed, and almost failed. To understand the chaos of that morning, we must return to a silence that reigned 3 years earlier. The year 2015 had brought a fragile, optimistic calm to the world stage. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal, was heralded by many Western powers as the definitive end to Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Inspectors were in place, centrifuges were spinning down, and Tehran was receiving billions in sanctioned funds. But in the heavily fortified bunkers beneath the sprawling headquarters of the Mossad, the mood was anything but calm. They trusted the inspectors, perhaps, but they did not trust the history. The Mossad had operated for decades on one core principle: Iran's nuclear program was not an industrial pursuit. It was an ideological imperative. Stopping a factory was easy. Stopping an idea was impossible. The question that burned in every analyst's mind was simple. If the nuclear program was genuinely dissolved, where did the historical record go? Military powers do not incinerate the blueprints of their most advanced projects. They archive them. They hide them for the day they decide to restart. The search began as an agonizing crawl through digital haystacks. It started with intercepting fragmented communications, cross-referencing satellite imagery of military facilities that seemed slightly asterisk to asterisk well, and tracking the movement of specific security personnel known to have worked on the pre-2003 Ahmed Plan. It took years. Years of watching, correlating, and waiting for the smallest slip. The breakthrough came via a specific type of Iranian security filena bureaucratic slip-up that listed the transfer of high-density shelving and state-of-the-art climate control equipment to a facility in the Shurabad industrial zone. Shurabad, not a military base, not a known research center, a sleepy, dusty district of warehouses storing automotive parts, textiles, and household cleaning supplies. The Mossad called the target the Turquoise Road. It looked utterly insignificant, a rectangular gray concrete structure surrounded by a thin steel fence. No excessive guards, no anti-air defenses, nothing to suggest that inside, tucked behind 3 false walls and 6 fire-rated security doors, lay the collected, complete history of Iran's ambitions to join the nuclear club. This was not a facility for making bombs. It was a safe deposit box for the plant's asterisk to asterisk make bombs. The preliminary surveillance, run by a small, dedicated Mossad unit embedded deep in Tehran, was grueling. They logged every rotation, every vendor delivery, every shift change. They used highly directional microphones hidden in nearby utility boxers to record the pitch of the HVAC system, trying to map the internal layout just by the echo of air movement. The analysis led to the design of the ultimate lockpicking tool, a team ready to break into the most fortified archive in the Middle East. The timeline was set, January 2080. The window was a single night during a major Iranian religious holiday, when the local traffic would be minimal and key personnel would be out of the capital. But 2 weeks before the planned insertion, the electronic surveillance team picked up a faint, almost missed transmission between 2 low-level MOI security techs. The facility was scheduled for a security system upgrade. The initial plan relied on neutralizing a single, proprietary magnetic lock system. The new upgrade involved integrating the lock into the Shurabad District's primary electrical grid and adding a thermal sensor array linked to a satellite uplink. The upgrade was slated to be complete in 48 hours. The team froze. They had spent 2 years planning against the old Dora. Now, they were facing a completely new security profile, and they hadn't even boarded the plane. The mission, Operation Scorched Earth, was suddenly facing a complete, total overhaul. The mission was off, or so they thought. But the Mossad does not easily abandon years of work. They decided to embrace the change. They had to assume the Iranians believed the new system was impenetrable, that hubris was the only key they had left. The new timetable was brutal. They would have to hit the facility asterisk before asterisk. The new thermal sensors were fully integrated into the satellite network, meaning they had to accelerate the mission by 10 days. They were moving from precision braking and entering to a frantic, last-minute. The stakes had just multiplied tenfold. The team arrived in Tehran disguised as ordinary foreign workers, a mix of EU, business consultants and one highly believable, if slightly anxious, Russian oil field engineer. The planning was obsessive. Every single movement, from the rental car agencies they used, always favoring obscure, local fronts to the brand of instant coffee they drank in the safe houses, was calibrated to the lowest possible profile. The Mossad understood that, in Tehran, the smallest deviation from local Kustanza jacket warning correctly, an overly polite gesture to a street vendor could trigger an internal alarm in the populace, which often acted as the MOIS's secondary intelligence network. The night of the mission was cold, the air tasting of smog and industry. The 6-man team assembled in the pre-dawn hours of January 31, 2018. Final staging area was a dilapidated garage a half-mile from the Turquoise Road. The team leader, Yossi, performed a final inspection of their gear. They weren't carrying weapons, a fundamental rule of deep Mossad infiltration inside capital cities. Getting caught with a firearm meant immediate execution. Their tools were silent killers. Diamond-tipped saws, advanced drilling equipment, liquid nitrogen tanks, and dozens of industrial black boxers custom designed to look like electronic measurement gear. The drive was silent. The streets were wet, reflecting the hazy orange streetlights. The tension wasn't palpable. It was suffocating, heavy like the dust in the air. Gil, sitting shotgun, felt the familiar, cold knot in his stomach, the signature feeling that separated professional operatives from amateurs. It wasn't fear of death. It was the terror of asterisk, failure, asterisk. They arrived at the perimeter at 2 a.m. The first barrier was the easiest. The outer steel fence. A quick, precise cut of the locks. A moment to listen to the surrounding darkness. And they were inside the compound. The building itself was the real challenge. The front entrance was a farce. The archive was accessible only through a utility door in the back, behind a row of rusting HVAC units. Yossi's team had rehearsed the breach hundreds of times on a perfect replique in the Negev desert. The initial breach was flawless. The first, heavy steel door, protected by a simple coded lock, was neutralized in 90 seconds. They moved into the narrow corridor. This was the moment for the pause. They were now inside the lion's mouth. Yossi signaled for a full stop. 2 minutes of absolute silence. Only the soft hum of the massive industrial fan above them broke the stillness. Gil leaned against the cold concrete wall, closing his eyes. He didn't think about the mission or the Mossad or the nuclear files. He focused only on the sound of his own breathing, slowing his heart rate down to a functional calm. The mission demanded precision, and precision requires stillness. The contrast between the silent breath and the massive danger surrounding them was hypnotizing. Then, Yossi slapped his shoulder. Time up. They were at door number 2. This one was a serious vault door. Armored steel, designed to withstand standard explosives and drilling. It was protected by the magnetic lock system they had prepared for. The counter-electronics specialist, using a specialized electromagnetic pulse device disguised as a flashlight, began his work. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked. Success. They moved into the final corridor. They could smell the clean, dry air conditioning intended to preserve the documents. And then they reached the final barrier. The main vault door. It wasn't a bank vault. It was a fortress vault. 3 feet thick, reinforced with titanium alloys, and equipped with a complex, German-made security system that integrated pressure plates and internal seismic sensors. The plan was simple. Drill 6 precise, overlapping holes. Introduce a specialized explosive paste not enough to damage the contents, just enough to shock the locking mechanism and pry it open. Gil set the drill rig. He aimed for the sweet spot, the target they had mapped using 3 years of radar data and acoustic profiles. The diamond-tipped drill bit screamed against the reinforced steel. The noise was intense, contained only by the thickness of the vault itself. They were running against the clock, against noise, against friction. And then, the moment of failure. The drill bit hit an unexpected layer of manganese steel rebar, designed to scatter drilling vibrations. The bit immediately snapped. The backup bit overheated instantly, seizing in the hole. The main mechanism was fused shut. The high-tech, precision plan was dead. The mission clock had passed 3:45 a.m. They had been on the compound for an hour and 45 minutes. The initial alarm had not yet sounded, but the local security shift would change at 5:30 a.m. They were now 90 minutes away from having to abandon 500 kilograms of explosive geopolitical data because of a stubborn piece of German engineering. Yossi looked at the ruined drill bit, the steel shimmering with impossible heat, and made a decision that bypassed all Mossad protocol. "Screw precision," he whispered, his voice dry. "We go thermal. Get the lances. Thermic lances, set-align torches, designed to burn through steel by superheating it to 6,000 degrees for a night, were the contingency plan of last resort. They were allowed. They generated massive heat, and they created smoke that could trigger an optical fire alarm miles away. The atmosphere in the cramped corridor became instantly hostile. Gil grabbed the lance, the flame roaring to life. The heat was immediate, oppressive. He pressed the tip to the door. Sparks flew, illuminating the corridor in blinding white flashes. The steel groaned, melting away like wax. The noise, however, was deafening. Even through ear protection, it vibrated in their chests. The specialist beside him began spraying liquid nitrogen constantly onto the surrounding steel, trying to control the thermal bleed. A desperate improvisational maneuver to keep the heat from radiating to the exterior wall sensors they knew were there. The extreme contrast between the white-hot steel and the freezing liquid nitrogen was warping the air around them. The moment of near catastrophe wasn't the noise, but the flicker. At 4:45 a.m., the electrical grid in the industrial park briefly surged, then dimmed. Not a blackout, but a microfluctuation. The Moy, which ran a tight ship, must have noticed it. It was 4:50 a.m. when the small red light on the external surveillance receiver inside the vault turned solid yellow, then red. The alarm was tripped. The central monitoring system knew they were there. Yossi screamed over the noise of the torch. "Extract! 5 minutes!" Gil finished the last of the cuts, creating a jagged, man-sized hole. The vault door finally collapsed inward with a dull, echoing thud. Inside, the archive was perfectly preserved. Row upon row of metal cabinets, each labeled precisely. Project 110 physics calculations, warhead design *. The documents were not in paper form, but neatly bound in clear sleeves, labeled and indexed, ready for instant resurrection. The team switched from operatives to manual laborers. They bypassed the cabinets, focusing solely on the pre-identified black boxers, metal containers holding the most sensitive digital and paper files. They grabbed the boxers by the dozens, throwing them through the hole in the vault door. They worked with the panicked energy of drowning men fighting for air. One specialist, mapping the remaining contents with a handheld scanner, shouted, "The hard drive. We missed the main server drive. It's in cabinet B4. That server drive contained the simulation data, the most critical, real-time proof of their progress toward miniaturization. Leaving it meant the difference between a proof of concept and a confirmed, active program." Yossi made the second snap decision of the night. "Gil, grab it. Now." Gil sprinted back into the now smoking, steaming vault. The air inside was toxic. He found cabinet B4, forced the drawer, and saw a solitary, brightly colored, external hard drive. He yanked the drive, shoved it into his tactical pack, and stumbled back toward the exit, his lungs burning. The 6 men, their clothes stained with soot and their bodies aching, dragged 32 metal boxers, weighing over half a ton, out of the building, just as the first faint, high-pitched wail of a distant siren drifted through the still air. They were out, but the hardest part had just begun. There were 6 men in Tehran, holding a nation's secrets, and dawn was coming. The exfiltration route was designed to exploit the very early morning traffic patterns, but the siren had changed everything. It wasn't the low moan of a standard police car. It was the frantic, urgent shriek of the Moy Quick Reaction Force. They split into 2 teams. 3 men, including Gil, loaded the crucial black boxers into a refrigerated white van, disguised to look like a standard local delivery vehicle. The sheer volume of material meant they couldn't afford to be discreet. They had to be invisible, in plain sight. The plan hinged on their ability to blend immediately into the commercial chaos of the awakening city. Yossi took the wheel of the van, Driving half a ton of classified documents through the capital of the country that desperately wants to kill you is pure psychological terror. Every motorcycle that zipped past, every parked car, every elderly woman waiting for the bus felt like an immediate threat. Paranoia became sensory data. They were driving slowly, trying to maintain the demeanor of a bored delivery driver, but their eyes were darting everywhere. Gil kept his hand on the handle of the side door, ready to execute the prearranged ditch and run maneuver should they be stopped. The van stopped at a traffic light. A local police cruiser pulled up alongside them. Gil held his breath, the metallic taste of fear coating his tongue. The officer looked over, bored, then simply chewed his gum and stared ahead. The cruiser moved on. Relief a crushing, physical weight washed over them. They were safe for the moment. They reached the outskirts of the city, transitioning onto the highway heading east. The border, the relative safety of a friendly neighbor, was still 300 miles away. The next 6 hours were a blur of coordinated driving, switching vehicles 3 times, and utilizing a complex network of staging posts. This was where the US support became visible, not through American agents, but through logistical and financial infrastructure provided months earlier, ensuring safe houses were stocked and maintained and vehicles were ready for immediate use, clean of tracking devices. The final leg was the most dangerous. They were approaching the border with Azerbaijan. The area was sparsely populated, but heavily patrolled by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. Just 20 miles from the crossing point, a voice came over the encrypted communication device. Zulu Savan code black. Moi's search pattern shifted. They are sweeping the perimeter grid 3 miles ahead. They know the documents are heading northeast. The Moi had connected the dots faster than expected. Yossi swerved the van off the main road, braking hard onto a barely visible dirt track leading into the low, scrub-covered hills. The van, laden with a heavy cargo, fought for traction. The goal now was not speed, but evasion. They had to disappear until the coast was clear. They spent 3 agonizing hours hidden in a dried-up riverbed, the sun beating down mercilessly on the roof of the van. The heat was becoming unbearable, and the sheer weight of their success pressed down on them. They could hear the distant roar of helicopters conducting aerial searches. At 3 p.m., the coast was clear. The sweep had moved north. They abandoned the van, transferring the 32 boxes onto the backs of 3 modified, rugged 4x4 vehicles, waiting just over the crest of the hill, a final logistical miracle arranged by their handlers. They drove the last 20 miles at breakneck speed across the desolate terrain, avoiding all main roads, until they reached the designated crossing point. Not a sanctioned border post, but a silent, unguarded breach in the fence, marked only by a faded red flag on a distant ridge. They crossed the line. The immediate feeling wasn't triumph, but none. They were on safe ground. The cargo was safe. The silent 4x4S drove another 100 yards, stopping under the shade of a large oak tree. Yossi stepped out of the vehicle, his face streaked with soot and exhaustion. He looked back at the receding mountains of Iran. The entire operation from the breach to the safe crossing had taken 13 hours. The documents, 110,000 pages and 163 CADs of raw data, arrived in Tel Aviv less than 48 hours later, flown in on a dedicated military transport. The arrival was anticlimactic. No cheers, no parades, just a massive security detail and an immediate transfer to a highly secure underground facility known simply as the Vault. The Mossad analysts, led by a team of linguistic experts and nuclear physicists, went to work. The atmosphere was one of silent reverence. These documents weren't just proof. They were the DNA of an entire country's nuclear ambition. They opened the files, one by one. The quality was shocking, meticulous detail, complex warhead schematics, calculations on implosion devices, and the complete organizational structure of the secret program, showing that the research was never truly halted. It was merely archived, ready to restart at any moment. The analysis took weeks, but the summary was clear and terrifying. Iran had not abandoned its nuclear weapons program. It had merely put it on ice. The entire structure of the Ahmad plan remained intact, waiting for the political signal to resume. The documents were immediately shared with the highest levels of US and European intelligence, the ultimate, undeniable proof of Tehran's duplicity. This intelligence was the cornerstone of global geopolitical shifts that followed. In April 2018, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood before a global press conference, presenting blown-up images of the stolen documents. He held up a CD marked Project 110 and stated, "We are showing you today the truth." The presentation, dramatic and damning, revealed the scope of the theft and the conclusive evidence of Iran's secret agenda. The global reaction was one of shock and disbelief, followed by a fierce political backlash. The information contained in those 32 black boxers fundamentally altered the debate over the JC, leading directly to the American withdrawal from the deal months later. The operation was a triumph of audacity over brute force, a victory of planning over panic. 6 men, half a ton of paper, and the unraveling of a decade of geopolitical deception. But for Yossi, Gil, and the rest of the team, there was no celebration. They were immediately debriefed, their equipment catalogued, and their minds psychologically reset. They were shadows, returned to the darkness. The only reward was the quiet knowledge that they had changed the trajectories of the world. The secret war is never televised. It is fought in dusty corridors, on silent roads, and in the agonizing seconds between a jammed drill bit and a tripped alarm. The true cost of intelligence is not the bullet, but the constant, enduring paranoia required to survive. Knowing that the most critical secrets are often hidden in the most insignificant places,